My mom spent $180,000 on my sister's weddings, but screamed I was her biggest regret. My grandpa struck. The air in the foyer was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the cloying sweetness of champagne. It was the kind of opulent, curated chaos that only a wedding of this magnitude could produce. My mother, Evelyn, was the orchestrator, a symphony conductor of floral arrangements, seating charts, and passive-aggressive remarks. The wedding was my older sister, Amelia's, the culmination of a year-long campaign of extravagance that made my other sister, Beatrice's, wedding 2 years prior look like a modest backyard barbecue. I stood in the corner, a perfectly pressed navy suit clinging to me, a glass of flat champagne sweating in my hand. I was the invisible man, the extra in the scene of my own family's life. The photographer, a jittery man with a permanent grimace, was hurting people for the family portraits. The immediate family, mother, father, sisters, and the groomsmen, he chirped. My mother, Evelyn, looked radiant in a lavender silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. She was fawning over Amelia, smoothing down her veil, her voice a melodic hum of approval. My father, Robert, stood stoically beside her, his smile a fixed, uncomfortable mask. Edward, get over here. You're in the shot, my father called out, his voice strained. I moved to join them, a ghost slinking into the frame. The photographer positioned us. My mother's smile, a perfect, practiced curve, faltered for a fraction of a second as I stepped next to her. It was a micro-expression, a subtle tightening around her eyes that only I, the lifelong observer of her disdain, would have caught. All right, everyone smile. Big smiles. This is a happy day, the photographer instructed. The camera clicked, capturing a tableau of forced joy. I looked at the image on the digital display later. A perfect family. A perfect lie. The reception was in full swing. The DJ was playing a terrible cover of a 90s pop song, and the dance floor was a swirling mass of silk and cheap cologne. My mother was holding court by the cake table, a 5-tiered monstrosity of fondant and sugar flowers. Amelia was gushing over the Venetian glass centerpieces, Beatrice was busy complaining about the salmon option, and I was just there. A loud crash from the bar drew my eye. The groom, Marcus, had knocked over a stack of champagne flutes. A server rushed to clean it up, and I took the opportunity to seek refuge on the terrace. The cool night air was a relief against the stifling atmosphere inside. I leaned against the balustrade, the sounds of the party muffled by the French doors. I heard a familiar, brittle laugh. My mother. She was just on the other side of the doors, chatting with her sister, my Aunt Carol. They thought they were alone. Honestly, Carol, Amelia's dress was a steal at $30,000, my mother was saying, her voice dripping with pride. And the floral arrangements alone cost $20. Beatrice's was a bit less, but we still hit $85. The venue, the catering, it all adds up. I'd say across the 2 weddings, we're close to $180,000. A labor of love. My Aunt Carol made a soothing noise. You've done a magnificent job, Evelyn. 2 beautiful weddings for 2 beautiful daughters. My mother sighed, a theatrical, weary sound. Yes, well, you do what you have to do for your real children. My blood ran cold. The champagne glass in my hand suddenly felt like ice. And Edward? Carol asked, her voice a little quieter. I'm surprised he's not making a toast. He's been so quiet all night. Did he ever find a job? My mother's laugh was sharp, a shard of glass. Him? A job? He's a stay-at-home joke. An artist. As if that's a profession. He's always been a burden. A disappointment. The biggest regret of my life. If I could do it all over again, I would never have had him. He was a mistake from the very start. The words were delivered with a chilling matter-of-factness, a casual cruelty that was more devastating than any shouted insult. It wasn't anger. It was a dismissal, an erasure. I was her biggest regret, a mistake. I stood frozen, the cold seeping through my suit. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. All the petty criticisms, the pointed silences, the way she compared my art to the wasted paper it was drawn on, the way she introduced me to her friends as our other one. It all clicked into a horrifying, devastating picture. I wasn't the beloved, wayward son. I was the inconvenient remnant of a mistake. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stay. I fled the terrace, pushing past clusters of laughing guests, my vision blurring with a shame so profound it felt like a physical sickness. I grabbed my jacket from the coat check, ignoring the puzzled look from the attendant, and walked out into the night. The city lights were a blur. I wandered for hours, through streets that grew less glamorous and more familiar. I walked until I reached the only place I'd ever felt safe, my grandfather's house. He lived in the old part of town, in a small, clapboard house with a porch that sagged in the middle. A single, warm light was on in the living room. I didn't knock. I had a key. I let myself in and found him in his armchair, a worn leather volume of poetry in his hands, a glass of amber whiskey on the side table. He was over 80, a man with a shock of white hair, deep-set eyes that had seen a century's worth of trouble, and the kind of quiet, unshakable strength that comes from a life hard-lived. He was the opposite of my mother in every way. He looked up, his eyes crinkling in surprise, and then he saw my face. The surprise melted into immediate, unfeigned concern. "Edward," he said softly, closing his book. "What is it, son?" I couldn't speak. The dam finally broke. A ragged sob tore from my throat, and I fell to my knees on the worn Persian rug, my head in my hands. I told him everything. The conversation, the words, the raw, gut-wrenching pain of being told you're a mistake. He listened without interruption, his hand resting on my shoulder. When I was finished, I looked up, my face wet with tears, expecting him to offer platitudes, to tell me she didn't mean it, that it was the stress of the wedding. Instead, he took a long, slow sip of his whiskey and let out a heavy sigh. A profound, bone-deep weariness settled in his eyes. "I was afraid of this," he said. "I was hoping to take it to my grave. I thought I could protect you from it, but she's just proven once and for all that she's a spiteful, foolish woman." My confusion must have been evident. "Protect me from what, Grandpa?" He set the glass down and leaned forward, his eyes locking with mine. "From the truth, Edward. The truth about your mother. And about yourself." He took a deep, steadying breath. "You were not a mistake. And you are not her son." The words hung in the air, bizarre and impossible. "I don't understand," I stammered. "Evelyn is my daughter, and Robert is her husband. But Evelyn is not your mother. She is your aunt. Your biological mother was her younger sister, Sarah. My youngest daughter." I stared at him, my mind reeling. Aunt Sarah? The beautiful, tragically free-spirited woman who died when I was a baby in a car accident? I had only ever seen her in old photographs. She was a ghost in our family, a name mentioned only in hushed, mournful tones. I was told she was my godmother, who loved me dearly and died before I could remember her. Sarah, she was, I started, my voice barely a whisper. "She was a light," my grandfather said, his voice thick with emotion. "She was everything Evelyn was not, kind, gentle, and full of life. She fell in love with a man named Daniel. He was a musician, a good man, but he had nothing. No status, no wealth. Just a beat-up guitar and a heart full of songs. Your grandmother, and I adored him for it. Evelyn despised him for it." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Evelyn had already married Robert by then, a man she deemed appropriate for her station. They wanted children, but they couldn't have them. Robert, he was unable to father children. It was a secret that was tearing them apart. Then Sarah announced she was pregnant. A cold dread began to creep up my spine. She was pregnant with me? Grandpa nodded slowly. She was radiant. She glowed. And she was terrified. Evelyn, seeing her perfect chance, cornered her and made her a proposition. She and Robert would raise the baby. In return, Sarah would not have to struggle as a single mother, and Evelyn would finally have the family she craved. And Sarah, she agreed. She was desperate. She loved you so much, and she was scared. She knew she'd be a single parent. Daniel had a job offer in another state. He was going to ask her to come with him, but she was in love with him. She wanted him to be free. She was a fool for love. She agreed on the condition that Evelyn would treat you as her own, that you would be loved unconditionally. Tears were streaming down his face now. But the contract was sealed in bad faith. The agreement was that they would adopt you legally, that the courts would be involved. But Evelyn, ever the manipulator, convinced Robert to handle it on their own. They never filed the paperwork. They claimed you as their own, but legally, your name was never changed from your birth name. Your birth certificate was sealed, and they told the world they were your parents. They lied to everyone. But then why is Evelyn so cruel to me? I asked, the pieces refusing to fit. If she wanted a child so badly, why did she resent me? Because you were always Sarah's son, he said, his voice filled with a deep, paternal sorrow. Evelyn saw Sarah's nature in you. She saw your artistic talent, your quiet soul, your compassion. It was like she was raising a constant reminder of the sister she always resented. She wanted a perfect, obedient, and conventional child. She got you, a gentle boy with his mother's gentle heart. So, she tried to beat it out of you. She tore you down to build herself up. He then dropped the final, devastating hammer. And when your mother, Sarah, died, she died because of Evelyn. The world tilted.
What?
She and Daniel were about to take you and leave, Grandpa said, his voice ragged. Sarah had come to realize Evelyn would never love you as she should. She was going to confess everything and take you away. I had prepared the legal documents to help her. I was going to help her expose the fraud, to give you back your real name and your real life. The night she died, she had just told Evelyn she was leaving and taking you with her. Evelyn screamed at her, told her she was worthless and that she would never let you go. Sarah was distraught. She left the house and got into her car, her vision blurry with tears, and she crashed into a tree. Evelyn's words drove her to her death. I felt like I was drowning. My mother, my real mother, was a ghost created by my aunt's cruelty. My aunt, who had legally and morally abducted me, who had spent a lifetime punishing me for a sin that was never mine. Why are you telling me this now? I whispered, my voice hollow. Because Evelyn broke the most sacred rule, Grandpa said, his eyes blazing with a fire I had never seen before. She was supposed to love you. She vowed it. Instead, she spent a fortune on your sisters, her real daughters, the ones she tricked Robert into fathering, and she called you a mistake.
You are not the mistake, Edward.
Your existence is the only proof of what she did. You are the living, breathing evidence of her sin. And now, I'm going to help you set it right. He stood up, the old man who had seemed so frail a moment ago now standing tall. We're going to the police. The night that followed was a blur. My grandfather, a man of immense integrity and meticulous record-keeping, had kept copies of everything. He had saved letters from Evelyn, pleading with her parents to help her. He had kept the sealed birth certificate with Sarah's and Daniel's names on it. He even had an old, undelivered letter from Sarah confessing the whole sordid scheme. He had contacted a lawyer and an investigator years ago, preparing for a day he hoped would never come. We went to the precinct. The detectives listened, their faces shifting from skepticism to shock to grim resolve as my grandfather laid out the evidence. They took statements. They opened a file. It wasn't just a domestic dispute anymore. It was a case of fraud, conspiracy, and the custodial kidnapping of a child. The news broke like a bombshell. My mother's perfect world imploded. The story was impossible to contain.
It was a tabloid's dream.
The socialite who faked the adoption of her dead sister's child. The $180,000 weddings for her real daughters paid for with the guilt money of a stolen life. The backlash was vicious and total. Her friends, the ones who had admired her for her charmed life, were horrified. They recoiled from her. My father, Robert, was a broken man. The weight of the decades-long lie he had participated in crushed him. He didn't fight the charges. He cooperated with the prosecutors, offering a full confession in exchange for a lighter sentence for himself. My sisters, Amelia and Beatrice, looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain that was even worse than before. I was the living embodiment of their mother's shame. It was a convenient narrative for them. They could dismiss their mother's crimes if they could paint me as the villain who had brought them down.
They disowned me.
They said I was ruining their family. My mother's trial was a circus. The legal battle was brutal and public. My grandfather was a rock. He held my hand as we walked into the courtroom, the weight of his love the only thing keeping me upright. Evelyn tried to fight it, of course. She claimed the adoption was a private family matter, that I was being manipulated by my grandfather, a bitter old man seeking revenge. She made a mockery of the court, weeping theatrically and accusing me of being ungrateful. But the evidence was damning. The birth certificate, the letter, the testimony of an old family friend who corroborated my grandfather's story, and Robert's confession sealed her fate. The judge, a stern woman with eyes like chips of flint, didn't buy her act. The verdict was swift. Evelyn was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and child endangerment. The real charge, the one that destroyed her publicly, was the custodial kidnapping. She was sentenced to several years in state prison. She screamed her innocence as they led her away in handcuffs. Her final words, spat at me across the courtroom, were, "You are nothing but a mistake. You have ruined me." And for a moment I almost believed her. But then I looked at my grandfather. He stood tall, his hand on my shoulder, and he whispered, "She's wrong, son. You are the truth. And the truth always wins." After the sentencing, my grandfather took me to the cemetery. We stood before a modest headstone that read, "Sarah Elizabeth, beloved daughter." I had never been to her grave before. I knelt down and touched the cold stone. "She was so proud of you," Grandpa said softly. "She used to write you letters. She left them with me, just in case. She wanted you to know her." He handed me a small, worn box. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to me. I opened one, and it smelled faintly of lavender perfume. "My dearest Eddie," it began in a beautiful, looping script. "I am so excited to meet you. I dream of your little fingers and your tiny toes. I hope you have your father's singing voice. I sing to you every night, the lullaby my mother used to sing to me. I want you to know that even if I can't be with you, you are the greatest gift I will ever have.
You are not a mistake.
You are my only perfect dream." A sob finally broke free from my chest. I sat down on the grass, the letters clutched to my heart, and let the tears come. They were tears of grief for the mother I never knew, tears of rage for the life that was stolen from me, and tears of a profound, soul-deep relief.
I was not a mistake.
I was proof of a love that was so powerful it tried to survive even the most wicked of intentions. In the months that followed, I began the arduous process of rebuilding. It was my grandfather who helped me. He helped me legally restore my name. I am Edward Daniel, named for my father, and he helped me find the father I never knew. Daniel was alive, living in a small coastal town, a successful music producer who had no idea he had a son. He had been told I died with his Sarah. When I called him, there was a long, stunned silence on the phone. Then a slow, disbelieving whisper, "My boy." Our first meeting was awkward, filled with hesitant glances and a silence thick with a lifetime of unspoken longing. But then he showed me a picture of Sarah, a candid shot where she was laughing, her eyes full of light. "She would have loved you," he said, and the ice finally broke. We wept together, two strangers bound by a love for a woman who was gone but who had left her mark on us both. My mother, Evelyn, is now just a name in the news. A cautionary tale. My sisters are stuck trying to maintain their status, their lives hollow and bitter. The $180,000 they got for their lavish weddings now feels like blood money. My grandfather passed away peacefully a year later, a smile on his face. At his funeral, I stood at the podium, no longer the shy, invisible son, but a man who had discovered his true identity. I told a story, the story of a man who had quietly, patiently, and powerfully fought for justice for his grandson. I am an artist now. I don't paint for approval. I paint for myself. I paint for my mother, Sarah, the woman with the free spirit who loved me before I even drew a breath. My work hangs in a small gallery. I opened. I have a photograph of my father and grandfather on the wall. My life is not what it could have been. It's not what I once dreamed it would be. But it is mine. And I am not a mistake. I am the truth. And the truth, no matter how long it takes, always wins.